All right, everybody. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today's topic is one that's been causing quite a stir online. And we just had to dive in and see what all the fuss is about.
Definitely.
Lawful versus legal trusts.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
It seems like there's a whole lot of confusion and maybe even some misinformation floating around out there.
Yeah, and maybe some strong opinions, too.
For sure.
Yeah.
So we've got this video that a listener sent in, and it really gets to the heart of this whole debate.
It does.
And I got to say, the guy who made it, this Spaniard guy, he is fired up.
You can feel the passion.
Yeah, it's like he's on a mission to debunk what he sees as a dangerous myth.
Yeah.
This whole idea of lawful trusts as somehow being separate from legal trusts.
Yeah, right from the start, he just lays it out there.
Yeah, and he uses some pretty strong language, too.
He does not hold back.
But it makes you wonder, what's driving this intensity? Why is he so passionate about this particular issue?
It sounds like he's encountered people, in the real world who've been taken in by this lawful trust idea.
Yeah, and maybe even suffered some real consequences because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's trying to set the record straight.
Right.
And one of his main points is that all L trusts, regardless of what you call them, operate within a legal framework.
Like you can't just make up your own rules and expect the system to recognize them.
Exactly. He keeps saying there's no such thing as a trust that exists outside of the law.
Mm.
And he breaks it down with these three key questions.
Okay.
Is there a beneficiary? Is there a trustee? What title does the trustee hold?
Right.
And when you look at it that way, it seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it kind of cuts through the noise,
Right. It's like he's trying to show us the nuts and bolts of how trusts actually work.
Yeah, like demystifying the whole thing.
Exactly. And he really emphasizes this point about legal title. That the trustee always holds legal title to the assets in the trust.
And there's no separate lawful title floating around somewhere.
Yeah, it's not like you can create this parallel system where you're somehow above the law or exempt from its reach.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Well, some people seem to think that's possible.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but Spaniard is saying that's just not how it works.
Okay, so no magic loopholes.
Nope. And this is where things get a little tricky for someone like me who doesn't have a legal background.
Sure.
What exactly does legal title mean in this context?
So legal title basically means you have the legally recognized right to own and control something.
Okay.
So when you put assets into a trust, you're giving that legal title to the trustee.
Right.
They become the legal owner for all intents and purposes.
And they're the ones who manage and distribute those assets according to the terms laid out in the trust document.
Exactly.
So it's not like you get to have your cake and eat it too.
Right.
You can't maintain control while also avoiding all legal responsibility.
Nope. You're essentially entrusting someone else with your assets and relying on the legal system to uphold the terms of the trust.
And this is where Spaniard starts to get really concerned.
Yeah, he's worried that people are being misled into thinking they can just draft and sell trusts without any legal expertise.
Yeah, he actually says it's a criminal offense to do that.
Yeah.
That's serious business.
It is. It's like performing surgery without a medical license.
You wouldn't want that.
No, definitely not. You want someone who knows what they're doing when it comes to your finances, especially when you're talking about something as important as a trust.
Absolutely.
And it makes me think about this whole truth movement that he keeps referencing.
Right?
It seems like this lawful trust idea is really gaining traction within that community.
Yeah, he's pretty critical of certain figures in that movement who he sees as spreading this misinformation.
And maybe even profiting from it.
Right. He doesn't shy away from calling people out.
No, he doesn't. He specifically mentions someone named Laura Nina and her association with Sean Young, who apparently has a bit of a checkered past.
Oh.
Yeah, it turns out he has a history of violence.
Oh, wow.
And Spaniard sees this as a major red flag. He calls it hypocrisy. Right, like how can you accuse others of wrongdoing while aligning yourself with someone who's been convicted of violent crimes?
Yeah, it's a pretty damning accusation.
It is.
And it makes you wonder, who's really looking out for people's best interests here?
Yeah, it's definitely a situation that calls for some careful consideration and discernment.
For sure. It's almost like a soap opera playing out online.
A little bit, yeah.
But the stakes are real.
Absolutely. And that's why Spaniard keeps emphasizing personal responsibility.
Right.
He's saying don't just blindly follow anyone, even those who claim to have the truth.
Do your own research.
Question everything.
Think critically.
And come to your own conclusion.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, don't just take my word for it.
Right.
Go out there and investigate for yourself.
That's a powerful message.
It is. He compares it to waking up from a dream and realizing that everything you thought you knew was wrong.
Wow. Yeah, I can see that.
It can be disorienting,
Definitely.
but it also opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
The possibility of seeing things more clearly.
Exactly. And that's what we're hoping to do here on the Deep Dive.
To explore these complex issues and help people make more informed decisions.
Absolutely.
It's a bit like stepping out of that cave, you know? The one Plato talked about.
Right?
Where you've been staring at shadows your whole life and then suddenly you see the real world.
It's like a whole new level of awareness.
Yeah, and it can be kind of scary.
For sure.
But Spaniard seems to think it's a necessary step. Like you gotta go through that discomfort to really grow.
And to really see things for what they are.
Exactly.
He even uses this phrase, sticking his neck out,
Oh, yeah.
to describe what he's doing.
He knows he's ruffling some feathers.
Yeah, he's definitely not afraid to challenge the status quo.
And he's going up against some pretty power figures in that truth movement.
For sure.
But he seems to feel like it's worth the risk.
Like he has to speak out, even if it means making himself a target.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, though.
What?
Why is this whole issue so charged?
Yeah, like why can't people just have a calm, rational discussion about trusts?
Right. It's like everyone's got their defenses up.
It's almost like Spaniard is hitting a nerve.
Yeah, maybe some of those folks in the truth movement feel threatened by what he's saying. Like he's exposing something they don't want people to know.
Maybe they have a vested interest in keeping things the way they are.
Right, maybe they're even profiting from all this confusion.
And when someone comes along and starts questioning their narrative, well,
It's gonna cause some friction.
for sure. Spaniard is essentially saying, don't trust me blindly.
Question everything.
Do your own research.
Think for yourself,
And that can be a pretty radical message.
especially for people who are looking for simple answers.
Right. It's not always easy to face that uncertainty,
Nope.
but Spaniard seems to think it's the only way to really find the truth.
And to break free from those limiting beliefs.
This reminds me of something he said about the song The Sound of Silence.
Really?
Yeah. I know it seems kind of random to bring up a song in a video about trusts.
A little bit, yeah.
But when you think about the lyrics, it actually makes a lot of sense.
How so?
Well, he's talking about this breakdown in communication. Like people are talking, but they're not really connecting.
They're not really listening.
Right. And it's creating this sense of isolation.
Like everyone's trapped in their own little world.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of what's happening with this whole lawful trust issue.
People are getting caught up in these echo chambers.
They're only hearing one side of the story,
And they're not really engaging in critical thinking.
which makes them vulnerable to manipulation.
Absolutely.
When you're not actively questioning things, when you're just passively consuming whatever comes your way.
You become an easy target.
And Spaniard is saying that's exactly what's happening with some of these figures in the truth movement.
They're taking advantage of people's fear and uncertainty,
And they're offering these easy answers that sound appealing on the surface.
but they don't hold up under scrutiny.
It's like they're selling a dream.
A dream that could turn into a nightmare.
So it's not just about trust, it's about a whole mindset.
Right, a way of approaching information and authority.
That can lead people down some pretty dangerous paths.
And that's why Spaniard keeps hammering home this point about critical thinking. It's not just about debunking this one specific myth.
It's about developing the tools to navigate a world where truth and falsehood are constantly intertwined.
It's like we need to become information detectives.
And learning how to spot those clues.
Evaluating the evidence.
Separating fact from
This
fiction.
is like a crucial skill in today's world.
Absolutely. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You know, before we jump back into this, I keep thinking about Spaniard's analogy of waking up from a dream.
Yeah.
Like suddenly realizing that things aren't what they seem.
Right.
And I feel like that applies to so much more than just this trust stuff.
It does. It's a pretty universal experience.
It is. It's like this sense of disillusionment that a lot of people are feeling these days. Like the systems they used to trust are failing them.
And in that space of uncertainty, you know?
Yeah.
It's easy to see how these alternative narratives, these promises of simple solutions and hidden truths,
Right.
can gain traction.
Especially when they're presented with so much conviction and passion.
Yeah, like who doesn't want a simple answer to a complex problem?
Right. But as we've been discussing, you know, passion doesn't necessarily equal accuracy.
Nope.
We can't let our emotions dictate what we believe.
Got to use those critical thinking skills.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
How do we become more discerning consumers of information? You know, I struggle with this myself
Oh,
sometimes.
for sure. It's a constant challenge.
It is. There's just so much coming at us from all directions.
Absolutely.
So what are some practical strategies?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to be mindful of your sources.
Okay, so not all information is created equal.
Definitely not.
So how do we evaluate sources? What are some red flags?
Well, first of all, consider the source's reputation. Is it known for accuracy, objectivity, fact-checking? Or does it have a history of bias or sensationalism or pushing a particular agenda?
So basically, established news organizations, academic journals, government websites, those are generally considered more reliable.
They tend to be, yeah.
Yeah,
But even those sources can have biases.
that's true.
So it's always a good idea to cross-check information.
Don't rely on just one source.
Right, see how different outlets are covering the same story? Are the facts consistent? Or are there major discrepancies in the narrative?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's easy to get stuck in an echo chamber, especially online.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We all have those algorithms feeding us content that confirms our existing beliefs.
Right, even if those beliefs are totally wrong.
Yeah, and that's called confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias.
And it's a huge obstacle to critical thinking.
So how do we break out of that?
Well, one way is to make a conscious effort to expose yourself to different perspectives.
Even viewpoints that you might disagree with.
Exactly. It's like trying on a different pair of glasses.
You might see the world in a whole new way.
Yeah, and pay attention to the language being used. Are there loaded words designed to evoke an emotional response?
Right.
Are there sweeping generalizations or claims that lack evidence?
It's like those clickbait headlines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're trying to bypass your critical thinking and just get you to react emotionally.
So be wary of that.
And don't be afraid to ask questions.
If something doesn't make sense,
Dig deeper.
consult with experts.
Do your own research.
Demand evidence.
Be an information detective.
Right. You don't just accept the first explanation you hear.
You gather clues, you examine the evidence, you try to piece together the truth.
And you have to be willing to follow that evidence wherever it leads.
Even if it challenges your preconceived notions.
This all sounds like hard work.
It can be, but it's also incredibly empowering. When you develop those critical thinking skills, you become less susceptible to manipulation
You're able to make more informed decisions.
about everything.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of lawful versus legal trusts, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
I think it's a cautionary tale about the importance of discernment. We need to be critical consumers of information.
Especially when it comes to something as important as protecting our assets.
Absolutely. Don't fall for those easy answers or promises that sound too good to be true.
Do your research.
Consult with qualified professionals.
Don't be afraid to ask tough questions.
And remember, critical thinking isn't just about debunking myths
It's about empowering yourself to make informed decisions.
and to navigate a world where information is both abundant and often unreliable.
It's about taking control of your own narrative.
Absolutely.
Well said. That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it informative and, most importantly, empowering. Keep those critical thinking skills sharp, folks.